you may not have noticed, but a quiet bilateral partnership is reshaping the geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia and beyond. While our attention has been focused on the overt rivalries between major powers, Indonesia and Russia have been intensifying their interactions and expanding their cooperation across an ever-widening range of fields. Over the past 2 years, this transcontinental partnership sends out many important messages that could have a profound influence on the future global order. While no one can predict with absolute certainty where this partnership will ultimately lead, one thing is clear: each step they take, from energy to finance and from agriculture to military affairs, is deliberate. These moves are driven not only by their respective strategic interests, but also by an alignment with the shifting global power structure. This was especially evident in 2025 when the Indonesian president, Prabowo, visited Russia twice and met with the Russian president, Putin, 3 times, a frequency far exceeding past norms and clearly beyond routine diplomatic courtesy. Historically, high-level exchanges between Indonesia and Russia occurred less than once a year. The 3 meetings in 2025 shattered this long-standing pattern, establishing a closed-loop process, meetings to build consensus, follow-up to finalize details, and periodic reviews. This framework paved the way for subsequent cooperation. During his first visit to Russia in June, Prabowo met Putin in St. Petersburg. The main aim was to strengthen bilateral relations, which culminated in the formal signing of the Joint Declaration on the Indonesia-Russia Strategic Partnership. This declaration is not just a formality. It sets out cooperation frameworks in key sectors such as energy, trade, and security, and effectively defines the tone and priorities for future collaboration. This demonstrates Indonesia's intention to establish a more stable balance among the major powers, moving beyond its traditional partners. Meanwhile, Russia urgently needs a foothold in Southeast Asia to counteract the isolation imposed by Western sanctions. 2 months later, the 2 leaders met again by chance at the military parade in Beijing commemorating the 80th anniversary of the victory in World War II. Though brief, their discussions centered on significant issues of multilateral cooperation, such as how the BRICS nations could coordinate their efforts and how the Global South could unite its voice, effectively establishing mutual support on the international stage. With the BRICS bloc currently expanding, Indonesia's active participation alongside Russia will significantly enhance both nations' global influence. In December, Prabowo traveled to Moscow once again, this time for in-depth talks with Putin at the Kremlin. The meeting reviewed the year's cooperation and finalized numerous concrete implementation details. Most notably, Putin accepted Prabowo's invitation to visit Indonesia in either 2026 or 2027 on the spot. This would mark Putin's first visit to Indonesia since 2013, a return after over a decade that underscores Russia's commitment to cooperating with Indonesia and signals the transition of their collaboration into a tangible implementation phase. Reflecting on their cooperative history, while progress was steady, it lacked major breakthroughs. During the Soviet era, Russia's engagement with Southeast Asia was heavily influenced by Cold War dynamics. While it cultivated closer ties with Vietnam, Moscow maintained a cautious distance from other nations. In the region, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Indonesia and Russia gradually resumed cooperation, though it remained largely confined to foundational areas, lacking depth and breadth. It wasn't until after the Russia-Ukraine conflict that the global trade landscape shifted. Russia shifted the focus of its cooperation towards Asia, while Indonesia sought to reduce its reliance on any single major power. This alignment of mutual needs suddenly created a perfect storm, propelling their cooperation into a period of true boom. In today's international landscape, Indonesia is caught between China and the United States and is under considerable pressure. The country aims to preserve its strategic autonomy while also seeking to influence regional affairs. Meanwhile, besieged by Western sanctions, Russia is urgently seeking new trade markets and partners. This convergence of interests has drawn the 2 nations closer, as evidenced by their frequent high-level interactions, which send a clear signal: Indonesia is pursuing a diversified diplomatic path, while Russia is seeking to establish a foothold in Southeast Asia. This collaboration transforms not only bilateral relations, but also influences the multipolar evolution of the entire Southeast Asian region. Economics undoubtedly serves as the cornerstone of this partnership, as the development and strategic ambitions of both nations ultimately rely on economic strength. Although Russia has not yet released figures on trade growth with Indonesia for the first 9 months of 2025, both countries have set themselves the medium to long-term goal of boosting bilateral trade to $100 billion by 2030. Against the backdrop of slowing global trade growth and mounting Western sanctions against Russia, this target is ambitious and demonstrates the confidence that both parties have in their partnership. Trade trends clearly show that since the Russia-Ukraine conflict began, Russia's foreign trade has shifted significantly towards Asia. From January to September 2023, 70% of Russia's foreign trade volume originated from Asian nations, with substantial growth in trade with Southeast Asia. This momentum has laid the groundwork for achieving the $100 billion target with Indonesia. During the period from 2013 to 2020, Russia's total trade with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN) barely exceeded $130 billion, with Indonesia's share being relatively small. However, the situation has now changed. Bilateral trade has grown stronger and become a ballast stone for their relationship. From a trade structure perspective, the two countries are highly complementary. Indonesia primarily exports agricultural products and tropical cash crops to Russia, with palm oil being the most important. As the world's largest producer and exporter of palm oil, Indonesia offers cost-effective products that are popular in the Russian market. In 2024, Indonesia exported 680,000 metric tons of palm oil to Russia, a 13% increase on 2023, with refined palm oil accounting for the majority of exports. This refined oil has many applications in food processing, household chemicals, and biofuels. Indonesia has set a long-term goal of increasing palm oil exports to Russia to 1 million metric tons, indicating significant potential for growth in this sector. In addition to palm oil, Indonesia exports rubber and tropical fruits to Russia, meeting the latter's demand for tropical agricultural products. Conversely, Russia's main exports to Indonesia are energy products, machinery, and military goods. This addresses Indonesia's energy needs for economic development and opens new export channels for Russia, alleviating pressure from Western sanctions. It is also worth noting that Indonesia's reliance on Russia for agricultural inputs is increasing. From January to November 2025, Indonesia imported 4.14 million tons of potassium chloride, marking a 32% year-on-year increase. Of this, 1.55 million tons came from Russia, accounting for almost 38% of total imports and establishing it as the second largest supplier. Potassium chloride is a vital potash fertilizer that significantly impacts the yield and quality of Indonesia's key cash crops, such as palm oil and rubber. Cooperation in this sector deepens trade ties and fosters complementary roles within the industrial chain. Two key factors underpin the steady growth of bilateral trade: enhanced trade facilitation and the expansion of local currency settlement mechanisms. Previously, most transactions were settled in US dollars, which exposed both parties to exchange rate volatility and the potential impact of Western sanctions. Simplified customs procedures and paperless declarations have significantly reduced clearance times and boosted trade efficiency. Adopting local currency settlements enables businesses to bypass USD intermediation, reducing exchange costs and creating better conditions for SMEs to participate in bilateral trade. Beyond bilateral trade, another key area of cooperation between Indonesia and Russia is the advancement of a free trade zone between Indonesia and the Eurasian Economic Union (EAEU). The EAEU, a Russia-led regional organization including Kazakhstan and Belarus, boasts vast markets and abundant resources. As Southeast Asia's largest economy, Indonesia has a robust manufacturing base and a substantial consumer market. Through such an agreement, it can complement resources and integrate markets, enhancing regional economic competitiveness. However, Negotiations for such an FTA are notoriously challenging and slow-moving, involving complex issues such as tariff reductions, market access, and investment protection that require extensive deliberation. Regarding palm oil exports, for instance, Indonesia is seeking tariff reductions from the Union, but some member states are expressing caution as they fear that low-priced Indonesian palm oil could undermine their domestic agriculture. In the services trade sector, there are differing demands regarding the level of openness in industries such as finance and logistics. Currently, only preliminary consensus has been reached, with no definitive timeline for the final signing. Nevertheless, both sides are strongly determined to advance cooperation. For Indonesia, joining this FTA would leverage the bloc's platform to access European and Central Asian markets, reducing its reliance on Western markets. It would also attract intra-bloc investment, driving domestic industrial upgrading and infrastructure development. For Russia, a free trade agreement with Indonesia would strengthen its economic ties with Southeast Asia further, help it to break through Western market blockades and leverage Indonesia's strategic location to extend its influence across the entire ASEAN region. Furthermore, the economic scale and growth rate of ASEAN surpass those of the Eurasian Economic Union. So deeper cooperation with ASEAN could offset Russia's losses in Western markets. Of all the areas of cooperation, nuclear energy is a particularly important topic. This would support Indonesia's energy transition while showcasing Russia's technological strengths and forming a core growth point for bilateral collaboration. As the world's fourth most populous nation, Indonesia has experienced rapid economic growth in recent years, driving up energy demand, particularly for the new capital Nusantara, which is currently under construction and requires stable, clean energy supplies. However, Indonesia's current energy mix relies heavily on fossil fuels such as oil, natural gas, and coal, and the country is facing supply constraints as well as environmental pollution and climate change pressures. Therefore, advancing the energy transition and developing clean energy sources has become a key strategic priority for the Indonesian government. Nuclear energy naturally emerges as a crucial option, as it is a highly efficient, clean, and stable power source. The Indonesian government has explicitly planned to launch nuclear power projects by 2032, targeting an installed capacity of 500 MW. This initiative has been incorporated into the draft National Electricity Master Plan for 2025 to 2060, signifying that nuclear energy has become a core component of Indonesia's energy development strategy. It has also paved the way for cooperation with Russia. Russia has well-established capabilities in the nuclear sector, with mature technology, extensive construction experience, and a comprehensive nuclear fuel supply system, making it one of Indonesia's optimal partners for nuclear cooperation. In fact, as early as 2015, Rosatom signed a Memorandum of Understanding with Indonesia's National Nuclear Energy Agency, paving the way for years of collaboration. From 2018 to 2022, Russia invested $13 billion in ASEAN, prioritizing energy and peaceful nuclear applications, a clear indication of its focus on the Southeast Asian market. Both parties are now finalizing an agreement to jointly develop 500 MW small modular reactors, with Indonesia's coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs explicitly stating that feasibility studies will be conducted first. At this year's St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Rosatom's vice president proposed a phased cooperation plan. Phase 1 involves constructing floating nuclear power plants tailored to Indonesia's archipelagic geography to rapidly address energy needs in remote regions. Phase 2 will see the construction of high-capacity nuclear power plants to progressively meet the nation's energy transition demands. This approach aligns well with Indonesia's needs, due to the numerous and dispersed nature of its islands. Traditional nuclear projects face challenges in both construction and operation. However, floating nuclear power plants offer high mobility and short construction cycles, enabling the rapid filling of energy gaps in remote islands while also providing experience for future large-scale nuclear projects. During this year's high-level meeting, Putin explicitly stated that Russia would dispatch specialized technical personnel to provide full-chain support, from reactor construction and nuclear fuel supply to personnel training and post-operation maintenance, whenever Indonesia requires it. Indonesia has identified Sumatra and Kalimantan as potential sites and plans to build a 250 MW nuclear power plant on each island. Both regions are vital economic hubs with high energy demand and favorable geographical and geological conditions for nuclear power development. Once operational, these plants will alleviate local energy shortages and drive regional economic growth. With Russia's technical support, Indonesia can also rapidly acquire nuclear energy expertise, cultivate local talent, and establish its own nuclear energy industrial system, accelerating its energy structure transformation. Furthermore, the modular reactor technology that both parties intend to adopt offers high safety standards, short construction timescales, and the flexibility to adjust installed capacity according to energy demand. Its strong resistance to earthquakes and floods makes it well suited to Indonesia's natural environment. Russia has extensive experience with this technology, having applied it in multiple projects, and can provide Indonesia with reliable technical support. Beyond nuclear power plant construction, both parties intend to strengthen their cooperation in the management of the nuclear fuel cycle, nuclear safety regulation, and the diverse applications of nuclear technology. This will extend the utilization of nuclear energy to fields such as medicine, industry, and agriculture, thereby maximizing collaborative value. In terms of nuclear safety, Indonesia is revising its nuclear energy law to strengthen safety frameworks. It has also established cooperative mechanisms with Russia's nuclear regulatory body to collaborate on safety oversight, radiation protection, and emergency response, ensuring project safety and controllability. For Russia, nuclear cooperation with Indonesia represents a significant opportunity to expand its presence in the Southeast Asian energy market. As the global energy transition accelerates and demand for clean energy in Southeast Asia grows, Russia aims to set a benchmark through its partnership with Indonesia. This could encourage other Southeast Asian nations to pursue nuclear cooperation, thereby further expanding Russia's energy influence in the region. Simultaneously, this opens up new business opportunities for Rosatom, alleviating pressure from Western sanctions. Both parties have now initiated preparatory work, with systematic progress being made on site surveys, feasibility studies, and technical scheme development. As cooperation deepens, this project is set to become a landmark achievement in bilateral collaboration and a model for nuclear energy partnerships with other developing nations. Cooperation between Indonesia and Russia has never been confined to a single domain. In addition to economics and nuclear energy, agriculture and military affairs are key areas, forming a multi-pronged, synergistic framework that continually strengthens bilateral ties. In terms of agricultural cooperation, ensuring food security is a core national interest for every country. Indonesia and Russia are natural partners in agriculture due to their inherent complementarity. Indonesia, located in the tropics, is renowned for producing palm oil, rubber, coffee, and cocoa, key tropical cash crops. Russia, a major global grain producer, ranks among the top producers of wheat, corn, and soybeans. This creates perfect complementarity in agricultural trade between the two nations. Indonesia currently holds a trade surplus with Russia in grain trade, primarily driven by palm oil exports. The 2024 export volume of 680,000 tons, representing a 13% year-on-year increase, is clear evidence of this. Furthermore, Indonesia aims to increase exports to 1 million tons, indicating substantial potential. Beyond the palm oil, Indonesian rubber and tropical fruits also have strong market appeal in Russia, meeting Russian consumers' demand for tropical agricultural products. Conversely, Russian wheat and corn exports to Indonesia bolster the nation's grain reserves and ensure food security. Given its large population, achieving food self-sufficiency is fundamental to Indonesia's national stability. Importing Russian grains compensates for domestic production shortfalls and mitigates supply risks. The aforementioned potassium chloride trade further strengthens the agricultural supply chains of both countries. Indonesia requires Russian potash fertilizers to boost crop yields, while Russia can leverage Indonesian demand to expand its exports of agricultural inputs, creating mutual benefits. Furthermore, agricultural cooperation extends beyond trade to encompass technology exchange, investment, and agricultural processing. Russia has advanced agricultural cultivation techniques, machinery and processing technologies, whereas Indonesia's farming methods are relatively traditional with low levels of mechanization. Introducing Russian technology and equipment could significantly increase the scale and efficiency of Indonesian agriculture while reducing production costs. Concurrently, Russian enterprises can leverage the Indonesian market to invest in agricultural processing plants and technology demonstration zones, securing investment returns while upgrading Indonesian agricultural technology. In terms of technical exchanges, both countries organize regular personnel visits and training programs. Russia sends experts to Indonesia to provide guidance on production methods, and Indonesia sends technicians to Russia to learn about advanced practices. This two-way exchange promotes technological integration and deepens agricultural cooperation. In terms of military cooperation, a traditional area of strength for both nations, President Putin has explicitly stated that Indonesia is Russia's long-standing partner in military technical collaboration, emphasizing the strength of their partnership. From 2000 to 2023, Russia was the world's leading exporter of arms to Southeast Asia, with exports totaling $11.24 billion. Indonesia alone imported $1.15 billion worth of military equipment, establishing itself as a pivotal destination for Russian arms exports in the region. Numerous Russian-made systems remain in active service within the Indonesian military, including fighter jets, armored vehicles, and naval vessels. These assets provide crucial support for Indonesia's defense capabilities and form a sustainable foundation for bilateral military cooperation. Indonesia's ongoing defense modernization efforts in recent years have fueled growing demand for advanced military equipment, creating new opportunities for collaboration. Russia has previously recommended the Su-57 stealth fighter to Indonesia and encouraged the country to revive its stalled Su-35 procurement agreement, which was halted due to U.S. sanctions. The Su-35 excels in both air-to-air combat and ground attack, and the stealth capabilities of the Su-57 could enable the Indonesian Air Force to make significant strides in its development. However, U.S. sanctions previously prevented these collaborations from progressing, although the willingness to cooperate has persisted on both sides. During this year's high-level meetings, military cooperation was revisited, with Russia signaling a moderate approach. Discussions centered on technical collaboration, personnel training, and weapons delivery, with the explicit aim of deepening military ties. However, no concrete consensus has yet been reached on restarting the stealth fighter procurement plan. Talks remain at the intent-sharing stage and have not yet entered substantive negotiations. For Indonesia, deepening military ties with Russia involves diversifying equipment supply sources to reduce reliance on Western nations such as the US and France, thereby enhancing defense autonomy. Previously, Indonesia's military imports were heavily concentrated, leaving the country vulnerable to international political fluctuations. Cooperating with Russia would broaden import channels and leverage Russian technology to enhance domestic military industrial capabilities, gradually achieving equipment localization. For Russia, Southeast Asia represents a significant global arms market. By partnering with Indonesia, Moscow can expand its market share, mitigate the impact of Western sanctions, strengthen its strategic ties with Jakarta, and increase its military influence in the region, creating a counterbalance to the presence of Western powers. Beyond equipment trade, both countries intend to reinforce military exchange mechanisms, hold regular joint military exercises, and strengthen cooperation in non-traditional security areas such as counterterrorism, anti-piracy, and transnational crime. In the face of numerous non-traditional security challenges, these collaborations will pool resources to develop a coordinated response, thereby safeguarding regional stability. Of all the areas of cooperation, the financial sector's de-dollarisation initiative has the most far-reaching implications. This reflects the strategic alignment of both parties, resonates with the global de-dollarization trend and aligns with a key BRICS cooperation objective. In recent years, the United States' abuse of financial hegemony and frequent imposition of unilateral sanctions have led to increased volatility in the dollar exchange rate. Consequently, many countries, including Indonesia, have begun seeking local currency settlements to reduce their dependence on the dollar. In May 2025, Indonesia formally launched an upgraded local currency transaction mechanism, previously limited to current accounts and direct investment. The mechanism now extends to all sectors, including securities investment, cross-border financing, and derivatives trading. This achieves comprehensive coverage of bilateral capital flows. This significant step marks the entry of Indonesia's de-dollarization process into a substantive phase. According to data released by Bank Indonesia in September 2025, RMB-IDR settlements between China and Indonesia totaled $6.23 billion from January to July this year, averaging approximately $890 million per month. This figure is approaching the previously projected $1 billion level, accounting for 28% of total bilateral trade, an 11 percentage point increase. Compared to the same period in 2024, this demonstrates growing market acceptance and an expanding application scope. On the 7th of January this year, the Liaoning branch of the Bank of China processed the province's first bilateral local currency transaction between China and Indonesia for a local enterprise. This transaction allowed the Chinese party to pay in RMB and the Indonesian party to receive IDR, with direct conversion and transfer of funds completed within one business day. This fully demonstrates the convenience and cost-effectiveness of local currency settlement. Such successful cases also provide a replicable model for Indonesia and other countries to develop local currency settlements. Indonesia's newly introduced foreign exchange mechanism, centered on the renminbi with the yen as a supplementary currency, further expands the scope of local currency settlement. By establishing reciprocal accounts between authorized cross-currency market-making banks, direct conversion between the renminbi and Indonesian rupiah can be achieved without USD intermediation. Settlement efficiency has accelerated from 3 business days to same-day completion in the fastest cases, reducing exchange costs by 1.522% while effectively mitigating USD exchange rate volatility risks. Currently, over 20 Chinese and Indonesian banks have signed cooperation agreements, forming a service network that covers major cities in both countries and provides enterprises with one-stop cross-border financial services. A major Indonesian palm oil producer reported that, after adopting this mechanism, its exchange costs dropped by 60%, while capital turnover efficiency increased by 40%. This has had a tangible impact on the company's competitiveness. This local currency settlement model is particularly advantageous for trade between Indonesia and Russia. Impacted by Western sanctions, Russia faces high risks in dollar-denominated settlements, making enterprises more inclined to use non-dollar currencies such as the renminbi. Indonesian companies also struggle with dollar exchange rate volatility, and local currency settlements stabilize their financial costs and facilitate smoother bilateral trade. Previously, Russian buyers proactively chose to pay in renminbi when collaborating with Chinese enterprises precisely because the renminbi-ruby exchange rate is relatively stable, achieving a win-win outcome. For Indonesia, advancing de-dollarization has 3 key implications. First, it enhances financial sovereignty by breaking free from dollar hegemony, mitigating the impact of Western sanctions and safeguarding national economic security. Second, it strengthens cooperation with Asian nations such as China and Japan. From January to July 2025, Indonesia and Japan's local currency settlement volume reached $508 million, signaling the emergence of a multi-currency settlement system that could attract more Asian investment and enhance regional economic integration. Thirdly, it strengthens Indonesia's position in the global de-dollarization movement. As the largest economy in Southeast Asia, Indonesia's approach could encourage other developing nations to adopt local currency settlements. Moreover, this initiative closely aligns with the objectives of the BRICS group. In recent years, BRICS nations have consistently promoted local currency settlements, developed the New Development Bank NDB, and constructed a multilateral currency system, all with the aim of breaking the dollar's dominance and safeguarding the financial interests of emerging economies. Indonesia's active participation will serve to accelerate the BRICS de-dollarisation process, both advancing its own development and amplifying the voice of emerging economies. Naturally, Indonesia's de-dollarization process will be gradual rather than immediate. Currently, Indonesia is piloting cross-border QR code payment interoperability with the People's Bank of China to expand local currency cooperation scenarios. At the same time, it is strengthening the development of its domestic financial markets, refining regulatory frameworks and foreign exchange mechanisms to provide robust support for de-dollarization, although the process may face pressure and interference from the United States. Indonesia's commitment to implementing reforms remains steadfast. Backed by other emerging economies, this trend will not be reversed. Ultimately, Indonesia and Russia's cooperation stems from their strategic positioning, being deeply aligned with the global trend towards multipolarity. Indonesia is seeking a diversified path of cooperation, avoiding allegiance to any single bloc while balancing between major powers. Russia, on the other hand, aims to expand its influence in Southeast Asia by collaborating with Indonesia to break Western containment. Their collaboration is therefore aligned with a global shift from unipolar dominance to multipolar equilibrium. As the rivalry between the US and China intensifies, Southeast Asia has become a key battleground, prompting nations to recalibrate their diplomatic strategies in pursuit of strategic autonomy. As the largest economy in Southeast Asia, Indonesia is naturally the focal point of great power competition. However, it has avoided taking sides, instead pursuing a free and active foreign policy. It cooperates with both China and the US and is deepening its engagement with Russia, India and the EU in order to establish a comprehensive framework for cooperation. This approach maximizes Indonesia's own interests while avoiding the country becoming a sacrificial pawn in the rivalry between the great powers. As a key member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN), Indonesia's diplomatic strategy also shapes the bloc's overall development. ASEAN consistently advocates independence, self-reliance, and dialogue-based consultations. Indonesia's cooperation with Russia not only aligns with its own interests, but also with ASEAN's principles. This could potentially foster closer ties between ASEAN and Russia, enhancing the bloc's collective international influence. For Russia, Southeast Asia is a vital way to bypass Western sanctions. Prior to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russian cooperation with Southeast Asia remained relatively limited to Vietnam. Following the conflict, however, most Southeast Asian nations resisted Western pressure and continued to engage with Russia, thereby granting Moscow the opportunity to assert itself and expand its influence. As a pivotal Southeast Asian nation, Indonesia has become Russia's most important strategic partner. By cooperating with Indonesia, Russia can establish new trade, energy, and military channels, leverage Indonesia's regional influence to extend its reach across Southeast Asia and strengthen its position in the Asia-Pacific region. This cooperation has also provided other Southeast Asian nations with new insights. An increasing number of countries are now following Indonesia's lead by pursuing diversified diplomatic strategies and seeking partnerships with third-party powers such as Russia, in order to balance the influence of major global players. For example, Vietnam has a comprehensive strategic partnership with Russia featuring close cooperation in the military and energy sectors. Malaysia and Thailand also sustain stable cooperation with Russia, with significant potential in agricultural trade and military procurement. In turn, Russia leverages these opportunities to expand its influence in Southeast Asia, positioning itself as a third force capable of counterbalancing China and the United States. Meanwhile, bilateral cooperation has spurred innovation in regional cooperation. Indonesia is actively promoting alignment between the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN) and the Eurasian Economic Union (EAU), 27 words, with the aim of establishing a cross-regional cooperation platform. The two regional organizations have strong complementary resources and industries. Integrating them would enable them to share resources, connect markets, and enhance economic competitiveness across the entire region. 44 words. In international affairs, the two nations coordinate their positions on climate change, counterterrorism, and global governance reform, safeguarding the shared interests of emerging economies and promoting a fairer and more rational international order. 43 words. Indonesia-Russia cooperation indeed transcends mere transactional interests, representing a long-term partnership grounded in strategic mutual trust and aligned with multipolar trends. 30 words. Their deep integration across energy, military, finance, agriculture, and other sectors has forged a robust strategic partnership. 23 words. This fuels mutual development and injects significant momentum into the global multipolarization process. 20 words. As cooperation deepens, Indonesia will gradually strengthen its presence in 13 words. International affairs, emerging as a major regional power on the global stage. Russia, in turn, will strengthen its presence in Southeast Asia, breaking through Western strategic containment. This transcontinental collaboration will reshape the geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia and beyond, becoming an undeniable feature of a multipolar world. As we await further developments in their partnership, one thing is certain: the influence of this cooperation will continue to grow.